All right, welcome to News Talk. I'm Brandon Jones. This is Robert Harriman. Outbreak News today, affectionately known as the Worm and Germ Guy.
Affectionately?
I think so. So I wanted to start off this week by welcoming everybody. A lot of fun stuff this week. Make sure you stay to the end to catch not only the political stuff, but try to lighten the mood a little bit. And he'll probably talk about some mosquitoes at some point. It just is what he does. There we go. So, all right, it has been on our plate for a while now. So I got a lot of different things. This is actually multiple pages. I'm going to have to take my pages apart to do all of this. And then I think the topic has changed so much in just the last week or so. And that is, are we in Civil War 2.0? Are we headed to Civil War 2.0? There's an article that came out pretty much right after the Rayshard Brooks shooting, when Jared Roth was overcharged, basically. And the premise at that time was that was going to lead to more division, would lead to more civil war. And I'm actually more inclined to agree with that than some of the other theories. But let me read a little bit from this article. This is a former police detective. Wow, that was awful. He did an interview after this. He says, "We're watching, unfortunately, sadly, a miscarriage of justice." So they're talking about him being overcharged. Then going into talking about the divisiveness of that, how it's going to fuel a renewed protest and rally and anger if these officers get reduced charges or don't get convicted and those kinds of things.
No doubt.
So this prompted the American Prospect. His name is Robert Kuttner. He wrote an article and used this very inflammatory language that America is as close to civil war as it has come since 1861. And once again, the central driver is America's founding stain, deep, persistent, brutal racism. So he goes on, he talks about the FDR era leading into those kinds of things. They include every demonstration of peaceful protesters on the side of the line with coilless, vicious cops on the other. He's not biased at all, as you can tell, right? The fault lines include trench warfare between honorable leaders of our country's armed services who resist the illegitimate use, Trump's own efforts to command the military for armed occupation of the country. And it just goes on bashing Trump and the White House and all these different things, leading us further and further down a civil war. Now, I wanted to stop there because I think that the protests, I don't even know what to go. So there are rallies, and then there are riots. There's really not much in between anymore. So people walking, some have fists up. They're saying a few things, might chant a few things. But then there are people that are trying to rip statues down. There are the Tim Pool conspiracy theories about Electoral College, where certain states have now got a compact that whoever wins the popular vote will get theirs, even if that doesn't align. So that could create a divide where both sides think they won. I am significantly less inclined to believe that's how it would come. But where are you at on this divide? Is it the worst it's ever been since 1861, as this professor puts it?
Well, in my lifetime, it's the worst. It's worse than 1968.
I thought so, too. I would say the 1960s were significantly worse.
No, I think right now it's worse.
You think it is worse now than the 1960s?
Yeah. Just because you have this population that is rebelling against anything that's American right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
that is a distinction.
I've never seen that before.
That's true.
Yeah, it's really bad, and I really believe it goes back to Marxist beliefs, and
I'm actually seeing that a lot of the Black Lives Matter folks being called Marxists now because of some of their remarks on we want to burn the whole thing down. The way they're talking about random statue. They've torn down statues of abolitionists, of Ulysses S. Grant, of people that are freeing slaves or freed slaves, that the extension of their intersectionality has gone too far for certain folks, and that's created some of that. Do you feel that, first and foremost, what do you think stops any of this? Or you think we're just on a slippery slope where we may see some highs and lows, but this is pretty much here for now until at least through November?
It's going to be here until localities do something about it.
Okay.
And they're just not. I mean, I understand that the Seattle mayor may start making some moves against CHAP or whatever it's called now.
Well, Chaz is gone.
Yeah.
They disbanded.
They did. They're gone
they
now.
put out a statement. They have a PR department, so they put out a statement.
Okay, well.
and they're giving it all back. They're going to be more online again, and they're all so proud of themselves. But I think more important than Seattle is we saw President Trump sign 2 executive orders in the last couple of days, really enacting the National Guard around federal property. We shouldn't allow them to destroy federal statues, federal property, protecting those, and that they will treat the people that have vandalized state property statues using the feds as more of a federal offense and not just a local city offense. Yeah. So there's a difference between federal property and city property.
Right.
Now, cities...
Now, the thing is, Trump didn't need to do that because there's already laws on the book for every one of those things.
He was making more, obviously, as a political and a public relations stance.
That's my point.
Yeah, no, I think it was all just a stunt to do that.
That's why I really say it's really up to the localities. I mean, Trump can do what he wants right there around the White House and in D.C.
It's federal property.
Right. But all these other places
they've all been private as far as I know. Now, I could be wrong because I don't know. And trust me, the list of statutes at this point is so long.
Yeah. So, I mean, I understand what he was doing, and it'll definitely hype up his base and all that. And I'm not opposed to it. I'm just like, it wasn't really necessary because it didn't really add anything to it.
Right. But what is the determining factor as we kind of move forward? Do you think this is actually going to be something we can heal from? What brings the country to calm down a little bit? Is there anything that? Well, can you negotiate with a Marxist?
No, no. And you mentioned, will this change at the end of the year? And I'd venture to say no, because even if Biden's in office, that's going to give them more.
I think they win-win. I think Biden wins, he'll placate to them. Mm-hmm, exactly. If Trump wins, they'll riot more.
Yeah. Now, I mean, it's gonna come down to police power versus criminals, basically, and see what comes out of that.
If they arrest enough people and you know you're going to get arrested, then you won't do it.
Yeah.
And if you're a Marxist that's doing it, now some of the complications have been in certain cities. New York City has been very public that they have actually released the prisoners. So they get arrested for doing it, and then they go out and do it again. Yeah. And they do it again. So then we end up with what, again, I hate just plugging Tim Pool so much, but some of his stuff is very unique. I've heard him use a term called tourist activists. So these are the people that basically work for Black Lives Matter and other agencies, Antifas, and they go anywhere. So they've been in Turkey, they've been in China, they've been wherever, and they're there to just basically rabble-rouse, right? They just stir people up and basically have an attorney that are going to get them off, so they know that they can do whatever they want to do.
Somebody's got to be funding it.
And they just, I'm going down the conspiracy theory of the money.
But if they're going to other countries...
Oh, this is a huge organization.
City to city, right. Somebody's funding this stuff.
So that's, to me, at the backbone of the divide, right? Black Lives Matter. No one disagrees that Black Lives Matter. But the problem is every time we're hearing the term Black Lives Matter, it's now an insinuation that when you're saying I agree with Black Lives Matter, it's almost like to say, because I'm not showing that I do. I'm not treating everybody as equal. There's like a presumption being put into the slogan. Then there's Black Lives Matter, the organization, which has basically become a Marxist organization. I mean, most of their things on their site now are into tearing down the system, dividing families. Go to their website. There's an About Us where we've reported on this. I mean, it talks about transgenderism. I mean, it's just like all sorts of stuff that has nothing to do.
Straight out of the playbook. It had nothing to do with George Floyd.
Nothing to do with any of these cases. They're not mentioned by name. It's just these general things. But then it's just basically like tearing down the system. And of course, the activists come out and says, "We'll burn everything down if we don't get our way." Everyone asks, "Well, what is your way?" And he doesn't answer the question.
Well, I mean, we've actually heard from different leaders too. I mean, I have seen them on TV interviews, basically saying, "Yes, this is what we want. We want to tear the system down and rebuild it." I imagine their image in. Any student of any history knows how that ends up.
So, but this is not a majority of people, and this is still very localized in certain big cities. And I say certain big cities, not every single big city. And you're still talking about a very small number of people in the grand scheme
today. Yeah.
No, I mean, I think it is. I think when you see surveys and you see 70% of people want to see their police arrest someone, when 54% of their people approve of keeping certain statues, you're not seeing a majority. And that's why they're so angry. They feel like they have something that's valid and they didn't win. So this is their response.
Right. And that's what my whole point was. I said today, 2 years, 5 years from now.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Right, the population is going to shift more to that mentality because these people are coming out of college with that mentality, and they're going to propagate like that.
Didn't we have a Marxist movement after the 60s, though? And it kind of...
There's always been a Marxist movement.
All right,
Always.
I understand. Yeah. But I mean, I think that there was a little bit of this, fear, and some of that came out of the 60s and 70s and other adults. But do you think it's...
But you never saw the universities actually promoting the stuff with such fervor as you do today.
Well, they bent the knee.
No, I mean,
they totally bent the knee.
I mean, you would think that living in Havana was better than living in the United States.
That's a regular mantra now.
Yeah. But they're not there.
Did we talk about where all that stems from? I'm not sure people know this. So should we talk about where like Black Lives Matter started and the cases that they this kind of stems around?
I'm not really familiar.
Okay, so when we go to Trayvon, some of the seeds were planted after Trayvon because you ended up with the media showing that they were going to control the narrative, and George Zimmerman was no longer Spanish. Trayvon's photos were not the photos that we saw of his most recent post, where he's flipping off the camera and he's basically dressed like a stereotypical gangster rapper or something like that. We saw jovial, happy, younger, smiling Trayvon. So the media, that was the first step for the media. It's like, this can work. This gets us attention. It gets us clicks. It gets us ratings. Then we fast forward to Michael Brown. We saw the same tactics, right? I spoke to someone recently. They didn't even know Michael Brown had been shot in the hand inside Derek Wilson's car when he was punching him in the face, trying to grab his gun. The gun goes off him in the hand. And that out of that and that whole hands up, don't shoot, that was all proven to be a lie, the autopsies, all of that is when Black Lives Matter was the first term that was used, the first time that it sort of came into existence. And it spawned a lot of different little groups. Mm-hmm. And one of those groups, I believe it was the year after, in 2015, it was the students at Missouri University. And they basically did the sit-in and the hunger strike to talk to the dean and the chancellor because they claimed they're being called the N-word. And this went on and on. Nothing was happening. And they had a homecoming parade, and they blocked the street. And I believe in the videos that I saw, we're talking about maybe 8 kids, 12 kids, hardly anybody. And they basically blocked the parade, and he wouldn't get out of the car. So the PR from this video turned so bad that they had a press conference, and then ultimately the pressure in the media spin on how bad this guy is, ignoring the racism, it's all out of control. It spawned him and the chancellor resigning. So it enabled them to know this is how we can win. And then immediately you started to see these type of protest tactics used for everything. Mm-hmm. This is way before the Berkeley Shapiro stuff and professors being attacked but it goes back to that sort of time frame. And they're not under Black Lives Matter. A lot of these organizations have different names, but they're there chanting about that they still have chains. And I'm like, they allegedly were called the N-word, but they're chanting about having chains. And you're like, you're at a major university chanting about having chains on. Like, people in chains didn't have free speech to speak about being called the N-word. I mean, It was very clear this was a Marxist movement then. And then, of course, when you factor in the other shootings that are famous now, we talk about, I'll pick a name and I could tell you about the stories. Yeah. And that all gets conflated by Colin Kaepernick in this same time frame, right? Then that's when, he wears the cops are pigs. He starts kneeling. The Marxist roots really take in that this is not we can't treat these cases as an isolated thing. We treat them as a representation of all of the police and all of the system. Because if the black police officers, they're just as guilty because they're allowing this to happen. The black Republicans, you sold out because this is happening. The white people, you're just as guilty. So I think all of this is this festering thing that's been going on for so long. That is where I agree with you that it's not ending in November. That's where I agree with you that I'm not sure that we stop this slippery slope 2 years, 5 years, 8 years. It's going to have to take a different type of leadership. It's going to have to take some different type of narratives that are coming and working through some of these issues.
Yeah. I mean, I just go back to these types of seeds are being planted in our young people, and they're going to sprout and they're going to grow. And I don't see that going away anytime. I think this is, I love this term. This is the new normal.
I
hope I'm wrong.
I do too. I don't really care for the new normal as being a thing. I don't think this is the idea that you can treat it this way. I think that it's a shame. I'm at the point now, and I'm going to say something ridiculously radical, so we'll get us in trouble. If this is true, in 2020, it's all a failure. It's all a disaster. It's just as bad as it was in 1619, as it was in 1865, as it was in the 1960s. It's all just as bad. Then basically, isn't that them admitting Martin Luther King was a failure? He's a complete failure. It didn't work. We don't have anything for these people. They're in chains, proverbial chains.
Proverbial.
I guess, right?
Yeah,
they're not physically wearing any,
right.
So I guess I'm just saying they feel as though they're still shackled and chained by our system.
Right. It's an interesting way to look at it because they are in the United States. I mean, people are shackled in other countries.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So.
Racism in Africa has never stopped.
Yeah.
The genocide in Africa has never stopped. It's in different countries, but it's never stopped. The Middle East is a horrible racist place. Ask people how China and the Koreas are towards black people, and tell me what it is about the American blacks that have it so bad compared to those countries. It is shocking. There was a story. You remember the story where Michelle Obama couldn't get off the plane? I believe it was in Turkey because she didn't have a shirt with sleeves. And they were afraid of how the racists were going to treat her. She would actually be in danger. It's been so long. I mean, we're talking like 2009. I mean, very early in the administration. It was just one random story that I remember us talking about during that time. And it was like, wow, I didn't know these countries. These are NATO countries. I did not know. I was so naive about how racist some of these areas of the world are.
Oh, yeah, they're horrible. But, again, that's... This population that is promoting all this stuff have no concept of history, of geography, of political situations in other countries. None, zero.
Wow.
They don't. Yeah. And that's why they get this from whatever leaders they have, and we're just horrible. We're just horrible. Which, I grew up in the 70s. I was a teenager in the 70s. The way things are now with race relations is astronomically better.
I agree.
When I was a kid, it was not as good, not nearly as good. I'll just leave it at that.
I actually told someone recently, I felt like my generation was the first one where, all the stuff that had happened in the 60s, Martin Luther King and Malcolm X was talked about so much with us. We understood the violent versus nonviolent. The culture had shifted so much. You had Jefferson's and Archie Bunker, where this was basically being played out in real time, where there's no difference between you people. Like, there's nothing, right? The escalations of attention on sports dramatically changed. Like, the NFL was small potatoes back then. The NBA, these baseball was the number one thing, right? There's a dramatically more prevalence of black athletes in the NBA and NFL that kind of came out of that. So we grew up in an era, my generation, the Gen Xers, where race has become like a non-thing. Now, maybe that made us complacent in certain cases and certain issues, but with the rise of the media and the rise of the internet, I think that now we're just seeing people get riled up over something and trying to conflate and make equal cases and stories that are not the same. We've talked about this briefly. We should not be trying to compare the circumstances surrounding Rayshard Brooks and George Floyd, for instance, the two highest profile. They're not even the same case. They're not even remotely the same scenarios, and that's the case on most of these cases. So, and how are those cases remotely reflective of the entire black community, how they're being treated by the system? There's a whole lot of presumptions being made.
Yeah, and you'll see there's clips out there of people, black people in Chicago saying, "Why aren't you guys protesting when these young children are getting shot every week?"
They had over 100 in a weekend.
Yeah.
And every weekend, I used to cover this stuff pretty regularly. We had somebody work with us, and there was usually 30 to 50 every single weekend. The south side of Chicago, the gang violence, the illegal guns, the illegal gun makers. I met with one. He was actually a former con who explained to me they can try to regulate these guns all they want. They have gun makers, guys that make unregistered, untraceable weapons for these gangs because they have so much money. It's not going to stop until you get in there and actually take all this seriously.
Yeah. And nobody gets arrested because nobody's going to talk.
Well, even when they get arrested, nobody talks. They almost always walk because no one shows up.
Yeah. So
I'll throw one last thing because last time we talked about my recent binge watching of a whole bunch of westerns, and I covered a lot of these different westerns. As I was watching this, what hit me so much was how privileged I am. Like life in the Old West that's just portrayed in movies. So that means it's 10 times worse in real life. It was so awful. Just the idea that they barely bathe. And then when they bathe, someone's bathed in that same water, probably multiple times. Someone has to pour hot water into the water so you at least have a warm bath, if you can afford it. That there's no communication. Like you have no idea what's going on in the rest of the world. You have no idea what's happening. The fact that literally you could just have bandits show up at your farm and just have no control to fight them off because they literally have 5 guys and you're just yourself and maybe a wife and a kid or 2. I mean, it was just... It's not that long ago.
No.
It is not that long ago. This is crazy.
I mean, just the stories my dad used to tell me.
Yeah.
It was like, oh my God, you had it really hard.
Yeah. And I'm not even talking about Great Depression. I'm just talking about Old West. Great Depression. It's like the thought that you'd have to stand in line to get food.
Get a block of cheese.
Yeah. I knew someone who their grandma would tell us stories like for Christmas they thought they had hit the lottery or something because they got an orange
in their stocking.
No, they got just the gift. That was all they got was an orange.
Yeah.
I think they had to share the orange. I don't think that she got an orange. I think the kids got an orange during the Great Depression. They felt like they had won the lottery.
Yeah, man.
I'm like,
straight out of Charlie Bucket, man.
It is beyond Charlie Bucket. Yeah. By the way, I could talk about Charlie. Charlie Bucket makes me mad, man. Grandpa can stand up and dance. You should have been working, man. All you old people, you're laying in bed, whining and crying. And poor Charlie has to have the paper route. I don't like this movie, man. The movie's got a backstory. It's kind of dark. I love this movie. I'm just being difficult. I'm being a contrarian.
Who's the writer, man? Roald Dahl?
Yeah, he's fantastic. He's a weird dude, though.
Fantastic.
Good, great stuff.
Great writer.
Great stuff. All right, Civil War. I don't know. There's also a Boogaloo movement. You heard about that? We probably just got ourselves banned over the. There's a group that use that word, so they don't use the word Civil War. I do not want to do that. If it means this video gets, I don't care. This is a term they use. I'm just reporting what they do. I've never heard anyone actually say this, but they were included with Trump's executive order. So it talks about Antifa and this movement on the right too. Whatever these groups are, he mentions them by name.
Is this something like the Proud Boys?
Exactly, but it's actually a violent version.
Oh, okay.
They're trying to create this type of violence. The Proud Boys, I believe, are more just soft,
vocal.
They're kind of like hardline protesters. There's a biker group that's similar. Like you aren't getting through these guys. They're big, they're strong, they know what they're doing. They're not physically going to move. They don't care if you hit them with a bottle. They're not, and some of them have gotten themselves arrested. I'm not trying to say these are good people. But these other guys, these Boogaloo Boys nonsense or whatever they are, they're literally trying to instigate violence from that side. I don't know. I
only heard them about 2 weeks ago. That's the first time I ever heard.
I had never, ever met or heard anything about this. It's kind of like it's just now surfacing. But Trump mentions it. So there's something going on there. So I don't know. Maybe the feds.
Maybe he's watching Tim Pool videos.
Maybe. Would that be a treat, man? Oh my gosh, that'd be great. All right, folks. I don't know. Tell me what you think. I don't know. Was there an end? Does Trump or Biden winning change the narrative or change the situation on the streets? Does any of these cases, does Derek Chauvin or Jarrett Rolfe, does their verdicts matter? Because that's not going to happen before November. That'll be 2021 at best. Maybe longer than that. And probably an appeals process when they're guilty. So we're talking about years before some of this would come to a head. But I don't know. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. And there's probably like another stack of articles that I could do along this same topic, but we're trying to catch you up on what's going on. Listen, we got a whole bunch more stuff coming up. Talk about this stuff, including maybe Mike Pence would just be better. Maybe Trump should just move aside. comments from Republicans. I think they're Republicans. I don't even know anymore. I don't understand how the system works anymore. They're not my people. I don't have people.
They're Republicans. They're just not conservatives.
From Bob.
From Bob.
I kind of tease Bob because 3 of the biggest television shows that have the hugest followings, we have massive traffic when it comes to BBC's Sherlock, Dexter on Showtime, and of course, The Walking Dead. Now, we have news on all of these things. The Dexter, they're in their final season of Dexter, season 8. They wrapped up their finale. Bob just shakes his head. He has no idea, and I'm not sure he even cares.
Well, I'm just thinking about the power of Ben Batch when we're talking about pop culture.
Oh, the power of Ben Batch. For those of you that don't know Ben Batch, that's Benedict Cumberbatch. He's the star of Sherlock. He was the villain in the Star Trek movie. And when we first started and transferred from some of our older websites, different things that we'd worked on, we started the Global Dispatch. If Benedict Cumberbatch's name was in the story, it had monster audience right away, and he didn't even know who this guy was. Yeah. I'm not sure you still.
I still don't.
Still don't know, right? So Sherlock is a huge BBC detective show based on Sherlock Holmes. It's a great show. I would recommend it.
Well, welcome back to News Talk with Brandon and Bob. I'm Bob. It's Brandon.
It makes me Brandon.
And you've heard of Jonah Goldberg?
I have to give Jonah Goldberg a lot of cred because his book, Liberal Fascism, was a big deal for me.
Yeah.
It really opened my eyes because it really connected. I had never had anyone connect the dots between fascism and communism. That basically it's the exact same coin. There's some very slight differences, and it really articulates well the Nazi Germany versus Soviet Russia stuff for me to understand those two philosophies and stuff so much differently.
Okay. All right. Well, that's a good thing.
So I have to give him credit. I actually have been a fan in that element of things. I have not read anything else recently.
Yeah. I've never been a big opponent of Jonah Goldberg. He said some things I like. He says some things I don't like.
With everybody else, so.
Right. He's just another one of those guys.
Talking head.
Yeah. But he did an op-ed for AEI, the American Enterprise Institute, I guess.
Yep.
And it's entitled, "Would We Be Better Off with a President Pence in These Turbulent Times?" And he's saying, you have all these Republicans that were like so headstrong against the impeachment, getting Trump out of office. And he says, would we have been better off today without President Trump? Those who claim quite angrily that impeachment would have overturned an election always ignored the fact that the 12th Amendment prevents that. Removal would have delivered a President Pence, not a President Clinton. And he just goes on to make some points like, Pence would have handled the pandemic better. His stewardship would have been better. He wouldn't have been hawking hydroxychloroquine or drinking bleach.
I don't know. Right. I think some of the stuff's also taken out of context.
It is.
He actually sounds like a crazy lefty at times in this article.
Now, he says it's unlikely that Pence would have launched the Battle of Lafayette Park and stuff like that, and his attacks on Joe Scarborough and all kinds of other stuff.
All right. So, but he also says that he looks at Pence, and Pence as though he's in hostage mode, and that he should blink Morse code for torture. I mean, he sounds like he should be on MSNBC. So I don't know. I mean, what do you think about all this? I think this is never Trumping nonsense.
It is. All right. Just to be clear, Jonah Goldberg is one of the more prominent of the Never Trumpers. If you're not familiar who they are, right? They're
Bill Kristol
and Steve Schmidt and
From
and all these other characters.
We're talking about high-profile political pundits that are
Republicans,
right side.
Yeah.
That are not
necessarily conservatives.
Is Romney now a Never Trumper? I would think he is.
I don't think officially, but I mean, I guess you could put him in there.
The McCains are.
Unofficial.
Like Megan she's not going to have any part of this. She'll never forgive him.
And probably Cheney's daughter's not a big fan.
I agree, yeah, the Cheneys. The Bushes at times sound Never Trump, but they always back off of that.
But it's primarily pundits.
Correct,
They're the big ones.
The label is Never Trumper.
And so I guess the question is, would Mike Pence be in the president? Should the Republican Senate said, yeah, let's get rid of Trump?
Yeah, so
let's start with that.
Well, first off, let me say that Goldberg I said he sounds like the crazy left because the crazy left and this Never Trumping narrative is obsessed with Trump's sort of like tactics, like his approach, his demeanor, like how he talks, like the way he says the hydrochloroquine stuff, the bleach and all this. And, you know, when you get some context, you watch the whole clip, you understand this guy just says, it's just like stream of consciousness. I don't think Trump's up there with this. He can't be a moron and a genius at the same time. The reality is he's a media mogul. He knows how to play the game, and he just starts spouting crap off at the top of his head. He says all this stuff. Would Pence? No, Pence would be more of a politician. It'd be more polished. It'd be a lot more scripted. He'd be handing things off more at these press conferences. He wouldn't be the one talking about things. I believe he'd be handing things off. So would it be a more digestible world? Sure. But there's a whole lot of things that Trump has done. There's no way I believe Pence would have done.
All right, let me go ahead and stick with Pence right now, though. Would the left-wing media be any more kind toward
Absolutely
President Pence?
not.
Why?
Because we have evidence with how George Bush
Exactly.
W was treated.
Though he's
But I would say that this was actually a reason that I moved, even because I was a Democrat leading into a lot of that time. That's literally my pivot point and a lot of my changing. And a lot of how Bush was treated, the lies, the manipulation, the out of context stuff, exactly what they do to Trump, but Trump is way worse, was part of the reason I would never move back in that direction. I'm like, well, I guess I can't be a part of these crazy people anymore. Now, I can't go... It's weird. Again, I'm out without a home. I can't be Republicans are always right. There's an R after their name and sound like I'm on Rush Limbaugh. I'm the host of the week. I also can't be in the Never Trump. I don't really care about these semantics. I care about a bigger picture. What's more constitutional? What's a better way to drive? Usually it's less government. Usually it's less of doing us less would be better in the grand scheme of things. I don't know what benefit Pence would bring other than better PR.
Yeah, I think that would be it. I mean,
I don't think he may not sign a certain executive order or something, maybe.
And he wouldn't be buffoonish on the air and stuff like that. He would be, like you said, he would be more polished. I think Pence, his stances on gay rights and all that would be lambasted, right?
Oh, the only reason it's quiet is they have other stuff to talk about. If Pence ever becomes they attacked his wife. She wrote a kid's book. And somehow she was unqualified to write a kid's book because of how they manipulate a story about something that he had done in Indiana. I mean, it never dies. It never dies.
And the thing with Trump, of course, is you mentioned constitutional issues, and Trump knows nothing about the Constitution.
He could care less about the Constitution.
Literally. But the thing, and this is what leads me into why I think Goldberg and Kristol and...
They don't care about the Constitution either.
No, but why they hate Trump so much is I think Trump does have very good instincts in certain cases. I think his instincts with certain economic issues, not all, clearly he's horrible on some economic issues, but certain ones he's got good instincts. And I think the reason why we have a never Trumper situation is because Trump has, this is my opinion, Trump has very good instincts on foreign policy.
I agree. But it definitely explains Bill Kristol.
That's why these guys hate him.
I think Goldberg may actually be drifting into the semantics camp. Like his never Trumping, he doesn't talk about foreign policy stuff in his article.
Not this one, no.
Right. So maybe I've missed some of the other articles. I know the Bill Kristols and some of the others, a lot of their arguments are from a foreign policy thing, right? We always joked about Lindsey Graham. He never found sand. He didn't want to blow up.
Max Boot.
Max Boot.
He's a never Trumper.
He is a never Trumper, right? Yeah. So Max Boot and Bill Kristol are the cut of the same cloth of we should go into Iran, we should go into North Korea, we should just level these places. And Trump has these instincts of not, but I think it's still economics too. He still looks at this stuff as like just not being a good bet for America. I don't even think, anytime Trump always says we're going to look into this, means I'm going to ask somebody that actually knows something. Yeah. He has no idea.
He has no clue, man.
I don't remember what I was told 2 months ago in that meeting. And I don't care. Yeah. So I think you're right in that sense that a large part of folks that'll still be, and these will be the people that continue to want to write books and get TV time and all of that. And
sure enough, if Pence does run, these never Trumpers are going to come out and support Pence because Pence will be Bush-like.
Yep.
I do suspect that. I mean, I've heard him talk in the past about...
I think pretty much everybody on that stage except for Trump was in that same camp. You see Carly Fiorina now kind of moving away from all of that too. I don't know, I'll say she's never Trump, but I think she's just not happy with a lot of this rhetoric and a lot of this stuff. But they also don't understand that when you're being hit and hit, nothing Trump can do is right, that sometimes tweeting about some nonsensical story, like Joe Scarborough, distracts them for 2 or 3 days to give you a breath to go on to something that's actually important. And many times, that's when we find out certain things were getting done. When he actually talked about some nonsense, the next thing you know, on Thursday of that week, while Joe and Mika are still rambling about some other thing, a bill gets signed. Something moves forward. And you're like, oh, okay. Yeah. And that's why people on the right are like, well, I don't mind Trump when it comes to policy because, and I will say, there's no way I believe if Pence was president the whole time, the Israeli embassy would have gotten moved. That's only a Trump thing.
Yeah, I mean, Bush promised it.
The promises have gone back for like 40 years.
Yeah. I mean, just saying, we compare to Pence to Bush already.
There's no way. I also don't think that the Melania helping the Saudis move forward with women's rights and then being able to drive would have happened. If she hadn't gone there and done some of the things that she did with the PR, that would have happened. That was a huge win for me.
On that.
Yeah. So things like that. North Korea, I think we'd still be treating North Korea. I think just Rocket Man and the fact that he'd go talk to this guy was enough. He has control of that system. It's almost like the alpha dog has control. That the moment we have President Biden or another Democrat, it's going to be rollover. Pence, I think, will treat him more like somebody I shouldn't sit down with.
Yeah,
and I don't think that's the best way to handle it.
And I think if Pence does come into office, you're going to see that old crew come back to Washington.
It'll be the exact same people. Yeah, I agree.
No, Trump is a buffoon. I'm going to say that straight up because he does so many things.
It's just so ridiculous.
He is totally destroying his chances for re-election. I mean, even people that were standing by him, I think are turning away because they're just so exhausted.
But I think it still is an emotional.
It is.
Everything is an emotional response.
It is.
But we're in June, almost July.
I know.
I think the emotional response will be different in October when you have. Let me say it this way.
I hope you're right.
Well, again, we're in different places because we have flip-flopped, right? I didn't vote for Trump the first time because I was like, no, I don't know. And again, I'm more in that camp of I didn't know what I was going to get. I thought he could be liberal. He was talking about putting up his sister-in-law for the Supreme Court, and he'd been pro-abortion 2 seconds ago, and now he was like, no, I didn't know what to believe or trust. He's proven his wares on all of this policy and stuff. I don't care. Twitter to me is a cesspool of vitriol. If you're on Twitter, you're doing something bad for your health. I'm telling you now, it's just nonsense. We dabble with it, and I don't think any of us take it very seriously. Like, my life is not
just a marketing tool
defined as 140 characters or whatever today is. But when you get to anything that has to do with Biden, what they say about Trump is usually true about Biden, right? The whole touching women and caressing their hairs and smelling their hair. Yeah, well, some soundbite that Trump had done when he was talking crap about feeling women up, you guys, they didn't care when it happened. And then suddenly we're supposed to care. But I'm not supposed to care about Bill Clinton, and I'm not supposed to care about Biden, and who's literally Creepy Joe. And then when he's awake, he's just Sleepy Joe, who can't tell me that he has a clue how to handle foreign policy. Like, how, if foreign policy is your issue, how are you convinced that this guy even has a clue to what's going on? He doesn't know what state he's in. He misspeaks like constantly. It's a sad situation. You go on, he rolls over for any of the topics. It's just I can't do it. I think that you end up with the lesser of two evils thing comes back into play, and the emotional swings will change. Never Trumpers may stay never Trumpers, but I don't think all these polls and surveys now are just nothing. It's just nonsense. And I think Trump does know that. He knows that he'll have to keep shoring up these stadium events and rallying these people up, and he'll need to figure out how to communicate better with them. I agree, he's mishandled. He's not my guy. I can't stand all of it. I can't stand we should put ultraviolet light in your body and have you drink bleach. He just randomly throws these things that you don't understand. And then if you care enough to find out what he's talking about, you get the whole story. And you're like, oh, God, it just shows what a buffoon you are. It doesn't show that you know anything.
Yeah, but the problem is the media is going to pick up on, this sentence, and everything else is going to be left out.
I know.
So
I know.
All these people, that's all they're going to hear.
Charleston.
Because most people are not going to do their research to find the whole story. Yeah.
Charleston. Everyone believes Charleston's true.
Now, the one thing I kind of appreciate with Trump, though, is it doesn't really benefit anything, but it gives me a chuckle, is when he does this stuff, how the media's heads pop off
over anything.
Yeah,
anything that he says or does.
It is so entertaining. And I'll be sitting there watching Morning Joe in the morning. I know how much you despise that, but Joe will be rah, 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 and Mika's in the back, like sighing with exasperation, like Trump is exasperating me. It's like, yeah.
All right, so when people
it's entertaining.
So when people are watching this, let me have them just take a truth test, right? So this will be recorded before it happens over the weekend. So you will have gone through more National Guardsmen protecting statues. You would have gone through possibly July 4th celebrations. Did the media give Trump a fair shake on National Guard, or is he more like, oh, see, this is the first step to being a dictator, and he's abusing his power by putting all these authorities around these things. He's gone too far. These are local issues and local things. That's exactly what they're going to do. I have no doubt that's how they will dominate these headlines.
Well, there's no reason to suspect anything different.
Yeah. So, but it wouldn't be any different than Pence. We can look at Bush. We can look at these other candidates. I mean, there's no doubt that they would treat anyone this way.
Well, they always love these Republicans after the fact. When John McCain was the maverick, he was the greatest thing, greatest thing since sliced bread until he ran against Obama. Then he was the worst thing. And then
he's a racist old guy with a whole bunch of houses.
Right. And then after that, he's
fine again.
Maverick again.
Well, then he saved him on Obamacare too, so he had to be the hero. And he was so mad that the media was treating him this way. He couldn't handle it. Romney, Massachusetts Romney, liberal as the wind blows, and suddenly we're supposed to believe he's this crazed sexist who hates everybody and will put people back in chains. And you're like, Romney? Milquetoast Romney doesn't stand for anything. They basically had Romneycare. I mean, we were supposed to buy that we shouldn't vote for this guy because he was crazy right-wing radical. Trump is right-wing radical. What are you talking about? The guy just spent like $8 trillion for nothing. We have nothing to show for $8 trillion of money. Yes, there's money being spent. There's money being loaned. It's basically about $8 trillion, and we have nothing. The economy is still a shambles.
Yeah. And what some of the never Trumpers do say is that, I heard John Bolton say this recently. I assume he's a never Trumper now.
Definitely got to be now. He's lost that. He's wrote a book. He's found a way to capitalize on all this stuff.
I mean, perhaps one of the worst human beings that I've ever heard of.
He's not a fan. If you didn't pick that up, folks. Lorax? Is that the Lorax guy?
Lorax.
He called him the Lorax.
But yeah, I mean, one thing he did say that was very true. He's like, Trump doesn't have a philosophy. Well, yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
I mean, I recognize that eons ago.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But I will say this. The one reason that I enjoy Trump the most, which you've kind of touched on, it exposed the media. Because he honks them off so much. Mm-hmm. Because Bush, there was a certain... They basically just treated him as being dumb. He couldn't be articulate. They would ask him things off the cuff. If he was off teleprompter, he'd stutter, he'd whatever. And I came out of the Bush administration angry because there was so much more to the layers. And then Obama would stutter and do whatever everybody talked about. He's a great orator. We're headed into with Biden running against Trump. And you're old enough to remember the knock on Reagan's second term was he was so old and senile. He was going to roll over and accidentally hit the nuke button in his sleep. Yeah. We had the famous Genesis music video, Land of Confusion, that mocked Reagan's senility.
The puppets, yeah.
Right? There's the famous Star Wars we named for the missile defense, and there's all these photos and things that would come out where basically it's like the crazy old man with the X-Wings and stuff in the background. But we're all supposed to vote for Biden now. Yeah. It's insane. It's how could I take any of these people seriously?
Well, he's carrying the torch for the D, so he's okay then.
Is it Nancy Pelosi that once said we could put a D on a glass of water and they'd vote for it? Was that her? Or was it Maxine or Barbara Boxer? It was one of the California districts, and it was their districts were like 85% Democrat. They could put a D on a glass of water. I apologize if I'm butchering this, but if you Google the glass of water comment Democrat, you'll probably find the quote. It was just kind of like. Yeah, pretty much.
I'm sure there's a lot of places like that.
Do you think that the radical movement will turn out to vote?
Yes.
You think so?
The reason
because they don't have a track record of registering.
True, but it is Trump. It is Trump.
Yep.
And B, Biden is going to be a figurehead at most.
Okay.
And that radical group is going to infiltrate. That's my. So
you thoughts. Think that this is vote for the cabinet kind of move?
This is the opportunity to get their feet in the door.
Well, that's true.
You know,
who do you think?
Where's the AOCs in them?
How do they fit in?
Yeah. Don't know yet.
She did win big in her district. There was a lot of talk that she might have an actual competition, and whoever the competition was, they didn't come out. So she won huge.
She annihilated them.
Yeah, she won huge.
Yeah.
So whatever that theory is, that's been shot up.
Yeah.
So is the VP candidate for Biden matters more than it ever has? Because obviously that sleepy old Joe, creepy old Joe, and the VP pick will either be more traditional D or more radical D.
I suspect
It's 99% chances of black female.
Yeah, I suspect.
Or Elizabeth Warren. That's it.
The people that are whispering in Joe Biden's ear.
Yes.
That's the person who's making the decision.
Right.
Right. Not Joe Biden.
Right.
Is going to want Kamala Harris, I think.
But see, she was just calling him a racist 2 seconds ago.
We never see that before.
I know, but that's. I don't know that he can handle that, right? It's like, so this is why, because Pence...
He may not even remember.
Because Pence, to me, is nothing more than a watered-down version of Ted Cruz. But there was no way they were going to convince Trump to take Ted Cruz to placate to the Christian evangelical conservative crowd, because he had piled on Ted for so long, he had called him names. Trump wasn't going to go for it. I'm not sure Ted Cruz would have. But when you go to this one, so you think Biden and the analysts will just be like, it'll be okay. It'll work out. You can take it, Joe. You can take it. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think Joe even cares. He's just hanging out, man, just waiting for his handlers to tell him what to do. I seriously, literally believe that.
That's awesome.
I don't think he's thinking that lucidly to make these kind of decisions.
It definitely should be in question, and it is very sad and tragic to see that this is where our state of politics even are.
That's why the opportunists are sitting there waiting at the gates, man. That's my thought on that. Yeah.
All right. No.
Biden's but he's the one that's not radical enough that gives him an actual chance to beat Trump. If you put one of these radicals in there, they ain't going to beat Trump. So you got to have somebody to open the door.
Right. So you need a Bernie bro. In this, you need a black female version of that. I don't know, though, because I don't know that Kamala Harris is that group, or she would have done better taking votes away from Bernie if she was really if she mobilized that group enough.
Well, it won't be Val Demings, because she's used to be a police chief. She's ruled out.
Yeah, but Kamala Harris was a crappy AG that abused her power in California.
No, you're right. You're right. But people still are kind of letting her slide on that. They're not going to let Val Demings slide. Elizabeth Warren is too Caucasian for the position.
No, I agree. If she was actually Native American, like in more than 1,024th, so she would be the candidate, because she'd have some sort of intersectional vote. But she doesn't get one because now she's been outed as being a total fraud.
And I don't believe it'll be Stacey Abrams, because
she's a crazy person.
Not only that, she's just never done anything.
I know, but
I mean, literally.
I'm not sure. I sometimes I feel like
Pence, as much as I don't think Pence is the brightest bulb in the room either, he will tear her apart in a debate.
I think that the more radical of the choice, the easier it would be for Pence to look good. Like that's what I think. I think that the more Kamala Harris is more of a risk to Trump and Pence than the more radical. The more radical you get, the harder it's going to be, because I think there's still a whole bunch of Democrats in the middle that can be scared off, because Biden is not appealing enough. All Biden represents is some sort of normalcy, maybe the Obama era. It's calm, it's not Trump. But you start getting crazy stuff in there, because you can't have somebody that's been out there going, oh, it's been okay to abolish ICE, it's been okay to live without borders, they can't have that person saying those things.
He's not going to have much of a choice. That's basically his list.
I know, but
pick one on there that hasn't said that. Liz, Kamala.
I was thinking Val Demings. That's why I was shocked that you were going there, because I think she's got more of a vanilla track record. She hasn't really been as extreme with some of this stuff, and because she's been so pro Black Lives Matter, it can overshadow as the police chief. She said all the right things. It's kind of like Durkin. Durkin is getting a free pass because she said all the right things. It doesn't matter that these people have destroyed the town, and I don't know how many millions of dollars it'll take to even put things, I say, even livable again, because I mean it is a wasteland of what they've done to this city.
Well, it matters to the business people there.
Oh, they're leaving. There's already companies left. They're just gone. And I would too. I would never have handled if it had been like day 2 and they've destroyed my place, and you aren't even going to try to help me out with dealing with the situation, or they're not going to let anybody in to help me with the situation, I'd be like, I'm just done.
Yeah.
I guess you're going to foreclose on it, and I'm just going to go somewhere else. I don't even know what to say. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, we'll see how it plays out.
Here you go.
Think?
Pence, Trump, anti-Trumpers.
I mean, Would we been better off if Trump was impeached? Would we be better off with a President Pence? Is Joe Biden going to be the next president? It's all going to play out. Let me know what you think down below.
News Talk. Hey, we're News Talk with Brandon and Bob. We're here to tell you about some of the facts so you don't have to waste your time watching CNN.
We don't want you wasting any time with CNN.
Or Fox, or MSNBC, or some of these other guys that are making a whole lot of money.
Start talking the news. It's Brandon and Bob. It's time to be a part of it. News Talk, News Talk.
We're going to run through this segment pretty quick. News Talk, and we're going to talk about California making some very aggressive affirmative action changes. This is a very strange maneuver to a lot of people, and Harvard has already done this, so it's not like it's a new thing in California. This is under their Proposition 209 language. Talks about their affirmative action initiative, and this is basically going to allow them to repeal Prop 209, and that this is, quote, amazing momentum for righting the wrongs caused by centuries of systemic racism. So again, the whole system is racist. That's why we have to make this move. We have to take away affirmative action because we're racist. Just let that sink in, Bob, because I know you're not...
Take it away from whom?
All right. So it says, just so you know, that Proposition 209 has forced California public institutions to try to address racial inequality without factoring in race. So, the Supreme Court has repeatedly ruled that schools can use this race as a factor in admissions. So, Prop 209 prohibits the university from basically equaling the playing field, because once you do race, it means all of these races, right? And that basically currently, this is their motivation.
Okay.
Asian students are overrepresented partly because Asian Americans are typically more affluent and educated, reflecting historical immigration policy. Daily Cow. There you go. The California system is flooded with Asians. The Asians overrepresent things because they get the same benefits of affirmative action as the Black Americans do. Mm-hmm. So the Black Americans are not as achieving as the Asians because the Asians are rich and they work hard.
Right.
This is the most racist nonsense I've ever heard. Right. I didn't know this was actually happening. We're in the middle of George Floyd protests, and we have this crazy racist move happening in California.
Yeah, this is interesting. This is something
Harvard already did.
Yeah.
Harvard's already done this.
This is interesting because this is something that I would have thought I would have heard on Rachel Maddow, but I did not.
Oh, okay.
Is that being talked about?
No. This is a swept under the carpet thing. Because if you actually read it, there's no way to hide that it's biased against Asians.
Yeah, so I mean,
there's no way to hide it.
Yeah, so here we are with obvious discrimination and not being talked about on the normal networks that would talk about discrimination. Jeez, I guess they forgot about the Japanese internment camps.
I know.
I'm like, what on earth is going on here?
I know.
Yes.
But listen to the racist language that this article has. The Asian students are overrepresented partly because Asian Americans are typically more affluent and educated. So the Asians have better schools and more money. We have to figure out how to fix that. So let's just take away affirmative action. Right. And they think that's going to end well for the blacks?
But also look back a generation or two and how were their parents doing?
I know, it was
they were
worse.
Working their tail off.
It was
right?
That was sooner than slavery was.
Yeah. It was
horrible. I mean, this is crazy.
It doesn't make any sense, but it makes a lot of sense that it's being ignored.
Anyway,
makes a lot of sense.
I had to bring this to the table. I'm this is going to be such an incredible litmus test because we're going to see how the PR handles all of this, right? This will be spun as a way of being tolerant and those kinds. But if you're going to eliminate the race, because I assume this will impact, because Prop 209 affects everything, I assume. So I assume businesses. What about different country clubs that were deemed racist? What about all those things come off the plate again? I guess if we're going to take affirmative action off the plate, I don't understand how they think this could end well for equality at all.
Now, does this include Asian students from outside the country coming?
Yeah, because they mentioned immigration.
Okay, immigration. So
yeah, this includes visas.
So you're talking about all. So we're talking about not just Koreans and Japanese and Chinese. We're talking about Indians, I assume, too.
Anyone,
And
evidently.
Asians, yeah, these are all really, really hardworking students. And they probably earned those SAT scores and GRE scores and the grades that they got. And to just assume that one generation ago.
But this sounds like it would. But again, I quoted that this is the UC Board of Regents chair, that John Perez, is who had said that quote about systemic racism. So when they use that term, and then the other part of the quote, he talks about UC endorsed giving California voters the chance to erase a stain, support opportunity and equality, and repeal Proposition 9. When you hear these quotes without any context, without understanding what all of this is, without knowing what Prop 209 actually says, it sounds like you're helping black people by punishing everybody. Like, it makes no sense that if you believe the whites are the evil ones, that taking away the system that gives them a different type of playing field. I don't understand. And then in your language, it talks about that they're affluent. I'm like, I cannot believe, because none of the other races are mentioned. That's another thing that bothered me so much when I read all of this, that only the Asians were mentioned. It didn't mention the Indian students or Hispanic students. All of this, I think, would be very high profile in California. And no, it is literally just the Asians.
Yeah, very sketchy. Very sketchy, that's I gotta say. Hey, Rachel.
What on earth? How on earth could they? Does this show that the Asians have a lower rung on the ladder when it comes to this? Because, I mean, it basically just shows, they're not the same kind of minority. They don't get the same status. It shows that they don't.
I think there's one word that describes this all for me. It's called envy.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of envy going on, and
that's what most of this stuff is anyway, right? Yeah. We've been oppressed because you're looking at some end results. But I've always wondered. Let me give you an example. I just finished watching one of these shows. Right, there's a whole bunch of these shows that are supposed to be propping up the black voice and different movies and things like that. One of those was a TV show, and it's not time to get into the TV show. But one of the things that's interesting is that there's whole episodes and time spent on trying to teach the black woman of today what life was for the grandfather during slavery. So I'm watching all of this, and at the end of this, when this kind of story kind of picks back up again in our time, basically, I feel like, well, doesn't that show how far we've come, how blessed and privileged she is, and how condescending and racist are you to think that you had to teach her that she hasn't lived with any, she hasn't had real racism because this guy did. This thing that happened to him in the past was so much worse. So we need to teach her, the black woman. I mean, it's just like, I don't understand who's thinking this way. Yeah. I don't know anyone who's sitting there looking at my students going, well, these Asians have it too good, and we need to make sure we knock them down a few steps.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if you ever read the book by Thomas Sowell called Ethnic America.
Oh, yeah.
So he goes through when the Irish came, when the Italians came. Well, back in the day, the Jews were the Asians of today.
Yeah.
Would this have happened to the Jews? Because their scores are always the highest. Their grade point average was always the highest. They had the most success, in the business world and elsewhere. Would we have been if such a proposition existed back then? Would the Jews be the victim of that thing?
And they probably still are the victim of this kind of stuff in a way.
But it makes you wonder. And I definitely recommend that book if you ever want to check it out. It's Thomas Sowell, Ethnic America. Very good.
Yeah. Anyway, I thought it was a topic of discussion that's probably not getting any play. If you've been flipping channels like you do, and you haven't seen it.
No. This is the first time. Well, other than the fact that you told me about it previously.
We got to prep it. So, All right, folks, look it up for yourself. Prop 209 is up for repeal in California. And basically, you can read about the diversity and the different things that they're trying to accomplish there, and give me your thoughts on where you think that will land. Where does that will impact different people? Because right now the language is like it's very targeted and very kind of some scary stuff. So stay with us as we kind of move through, squeeze in another topic for you.
Now, the Kaylee Hardig case, the 12-year-old girl from Arkansas, she is pretty much officially the third person that's ever survived this disease, and her parents have posted on Facebook that she has been walking, she's now drinking, and she's able to eat whole foods in very, very small bites. So it's incredible progress for Kaylee.
Yeah,
Bob's searching something.
got an interesting email. I want to
right.
share it with
We
everybody.
got emails, stuff's going in. Listen, folks, if you have a topic you want us to get into and things like that, I've been getting a few things privately, so that's kind of cool. And you were getting this recorded a little early, as I'm going to take a vacation for a few days, try to find my brain, find some sanity. I'm actually the one that likes to travel and go on vacation a lot, and I've been kind of on lockdown here since like February 14th. My wife and I had a vacation for Valentine's, and that's when I got bit by the spider. Do you remember how bad I was after that ridiculousness?
Yeah, you mentioned it.
I was laid in bed for days. I wasn't allowed to do much of anything, and it was like, well, I was given a whole list of all these things that could go wrong, and if any of these things happened, I had to go straight to the emergency room. And then we had a giant pandemic breakout, by the way. So I was like, all right, well, life had to stop, and has stopped ever since. So I have no idea what Bob's looking for. So
I can't seem to find it, of course.
that's fine. Well, we'll get it on another episode if we can't find it right now.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. When you are going through your downtime and you have stuff that's not, we kind of joke, we call it real work. When you're not doing real work, what drives Bob? What gets you through? How do you work through your day and your life and things like that? What motivates you and gets you going and those kinds of things?
Motivates me for doing this?
Oh, sure.
Or in general?
Whatever.
Well, doing this, I don't know. There's certain types of topics that I'm drawn to, like a magnet to steel. I like topics that are off the mainstream, off the beaten path. Of course, I have to dedicate a lot of time to the infectious disease news. I have no choice in that. That's just a big part of the business, and
There's always news.
yeah, big part of the interest.
There's always mosquitoes killing somebody.
Yeah, and check out the Tampa Dispatch, some of the latest things going on in Florida. But
Or Outbreak News Today, where stuff's going on all around the world.
all around the world. I'm a Christian man, so I do look at I pray, and that guides me sometimes too, and that leads me to certain types of articles that I'm attracted to. I may not been searching for it; it just pops up. Like this tweet would be one example.
Right.
Yeah, I do kind of like Twitter in this aspect.
You definitely enjoy the gameplay of it more than I do. I do not enjoy the gameplay at all.
Well, for example, there was a Twitter's very hilarious. It can be if you look at it through a different lens. Liz Cheney tweeted a picture of her dad with a mask on, and yesterday.
Just cue the Darth Vader references.
Here we go. All right. So it's like she writes, "Real men wear masks." Well, about 10 seconds later, here's a tweet from Rand Paul. Oh, I see he changed his mask. It was a big picture of Darth Vader's mask.
Just cue the Vader.
It was just so funny.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there was, I got an email I was actually looking for. I'm on Tom Wood's email list, and he was talking about the Dixie Chicks, which, that kind of stuff, it's trivial, but it's entertaining.
They changed their name.
Right. So they dropped Dixie, and it's like, now they're called the Chicks.
Which isn't sexist at all.
Right. So he's like, all right, well, it's not as if they had to drop Dixie. It's not as if they were ever promoting slavery at any time in their life. Now they're the Chicks. How long will it take for them to be chastised for anti-woman?
They should.
Whatever, right? Then they're going to be called the.
Yeah.
Right? The. And he goes, then he says they're going to have legal issues because in the late 70s and the early 80s, there was a band called The.
The.
Yeah. So, I mean, just stupid stuff like that just gets me going.
Well, Lady Antebellum did it too. She dropped the Antebellum, so she's Lady A.
But they're in a lawsuit, though, because there's actually a singer called Lady A.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That is fantastic.
Who's been Lady A for 20 years.
That's even better.
Yeah, so
I love this stuff.
I mean, the shenanigans, people don't even think about what they're doing.
That is great.
Yeah, so that kind of stuff. if you don't get any laughter and any enjoyment out of this, it's really hard to do it because you just can't do gory crime news and
That's my area of expertise.
political hijinks, because all that stuff gets under your skin sometimes, right?
Doesn't get under my skin.
So I like to.
The media lying and making up stories is what gets under my skin. It bothers me so much. There's stuff I can't get to. And I'm the one that will use the term fake news, because when I write fake news, I literally mean they are lying to you in this story. So that is probably the one that's like a open wound thing, stuff like that. So,
yeah. But yeah, I mean, I'm pulled in all different directions because of multi-interests. So,
when do you start your day?
Typically at the latest 5 a.m.
So you're up usually before 5 a.m.
Yeah, I have to, because I have to get stuff done for the website before I go to work. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it's going to be...
Do you think it's a key to your success to keep that as a routine, or you do not do that on the weekends?
No, I do it on the weekends also.
Okay.
Yeah. Before I have to get into the meat of my day, like Sundays are incredibly busy. So before I start my Sunday activities, which will last from 8 a.m. till 6 p.m., I'm up at 5 writing some stories just so I have something going. Kind of what we jokingly like to call the Kevin McHale theory, right? Just very fundamental in everything that we do. And then, I try to get up, do something at night without trying to take away too much time from my family time. Yeah. So it's a juggling act, as you know. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about you? What gets you going?
My ADD drives me all over the road, so I do a lot in bursts and different things. Like I can't do any one thing for very long. I kind of short circuit. Mm-hmm. So it works well that we do so many different things at once, but I couldn't sit and do like writing for Tampa Dispatch all day. I wouldn't be able to do it. After 3 or 4 hours, I'd be on short circuit. I'd be done, shut the computer off, done for the day. And that happens pretty much no matter whatever it's at. But I'm up early too, usually 3 or 4, and definitely by 5. I'll sleep. When I'll say I sleep in, I'll sleep in until 6. And it means I don't have anything to do or get to. It's like vacation will be like that. I'll be up, and I actually feel like I get so much done. Like if I get up early like that and work, I can have so much done by 7 or 8, and I kind of like have a little reward inside where I feel like, look at how much I've gotten done before other people are even out of bed. Yeah. I don't wear that as a badge of arrogance. I try to use it as a motivation tool. And I was motivated. I found that by Schwarzenegger had always said that, because he talks about getting up at like between 4 and 4:30, and he reads for an hour and he works out, and it's literally like this very strict regiment that he always has, and it kind of motivated me to evaluate dead time. So I started doing that, and I realized basically when the time changed, I just didn't change. When I was waking up, instead of it was an hour earlier, I'll get up. And eventually I just got conditioned to keep getting up earlier. And that's kind of how it started. And I usually have sort of an outline of some different things that need to get done. And I think that there is something to be said about the epinephrine and dopamine that you get when you're physically marking things off your list. So I try to do that, but I'm not one that likes to add. I don't mark something off just so I can add 3 things. I like to go through the motions of, completion and figuring out, not letting it overwhelm me. But there's times where it gets to you, that kind of thing.
Yeah. One issue I do have, though, is if I am doing one of the A, B, C, D different projects, I always feel like I'm letting the other projects down, right? And I guess that's just a natural thing. It's like,
I tried to think of it as like classes in school. We'd go to math class, we'd do a little bit. We'd go to English class and do a little bit. So I try to have sort of devote buckets, even if they're not in that same day. I could be, all right, well, Tuesday is the day for this, or the Wednesday is the day for that. Those are the things that go. So the structure, and the show has helped with that, because we were consistently doing this. It's forcing different routines into place because we have sort of strict things that we said that we're going to try to live and die by. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that's basically it. And I do when I do bring up a story for the show, I try to make it more unique than what's typically found out there.
Right.
I try
to have a balance, because I like to try to make sure that I'm bringing in like a synopsis of this big stuff, and we can try to take it. And someone way back, I think this might have been Desk O'Brien era, called it about the cliff notes of the news. Was that something you said or Brian said? Because it was kind of like, that was kind of our approach to, we want to give you the gist of what's going on, so you would not have to spend so much time listening to all this noise and getting immersed in it. And my wife's always like that. She's always been such an encourager for that. She's like, I'd rather have you guys say that. And anything that's health, all this COVID stuff, she goes, I'll just wait for Bob. She's one of your biggest fans.
Okay.
She just always says that. Well, I'll wait for Bob.
Okay, well that's
Because she just figures that she's going to get it, and then that's it. Like that's what I need to know. I don't have to go through all this noise.
yeah, and we definitely have some very. Other than your wife, we do have some other distinct fans. I'd like to thank Lisa.
Well, Lisa's a diehard.
She's always there.
Yeah.
I mean, she's like on all the Facebook pages.
Yep.
Yeah. So I mean,
yeah, we need a social media manager. That's for sure.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work.
yeah, it keeps you busy, but
And I'm not interested in it. It's part of my problem with that stuff. I just don't care enough.
well, I think it's something that I think it's key to success, though.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go without social media, a good strong presence, it hurts you.
You know, my turn off of Twitter is that when you go to like what's trending, all the hashtag and stuff, they're so far left.
It is.
That I don't have any appeal. Like it turns me off. I'm like, well, they're not talking about things that I'm interested in, or they're not talking about things that aren't so crazy anti-Trump, or they'll just come up with something random. I saw one the other day. It was like that. I don't think it was an athlete or an actor, but it was just like just a way of just being mean or cruel to somebody. And I'm like, I don't have any interest in somebody. See, I follow Michael Malice. You know who Michael Malice is?
I know him well. Mm-hmm.
He just treats it as like a giant opportunity to troll people, and he's a master. And he just makes me laugh. So he actually, Michael, if you were ever to see something like this, I want you to know you just give me joy in those 140 characters almost every time. He's like a 98% hit rate on. And then the Babylon Bee.
Yeah.
The Babylon Bee is like gold. They're the Mark McGuire of satire. They're like tee up a ball for the fence, man. It is just gold. And then the fact that they Snopes and fact check this nonsense, and then the fact that some of these headlines will come true because the media will talk themselves into a circle, makes me warm inside.
The other funny thing about Twitter, and I've always thought about doing a video series on Twitter insanity and stuff like that, because some of that stuff you were mentioning,
we can do that.
Radical stuff.
Yeah.
But also some of the people that just go on there and lay out something very personal that happened to them and looking for reinforcement. For example, there might be, I see this stuff a lot, like a female doctor will put out there, yeah, I had a patient call me sweetie today or something like that. And then it would be like one after the other.
Right.
Saying,
oh, how sexist, how horrible, how demeaning.
Yeah, it's just like, and this goes on all the time. That's just one example. And that's, I think that kind of stuff is show worthy, honestly.
Yeah.
In some kind of way. I'm not sure how to actually.
We'll have to do a segment. Have to come up with like a little logo, the Twitter dysfunction of the week or something.
Yeah.
Probably week's probably too much, but we could do a little Twitter dysfunction.
But there's always something. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And
We need some segments.
And these people are just complaining, and some of the language is just off the charts.
Oh, it's totally unfiltered. That's why I don't understand the idea of using hate speech as a justification whenever it's like there's literally just foul filth. We saw this with Ice Cube, right? Rand Paul does a reform, and then there's a tweet of a KKK hat.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're an awful human being. You are the racist in this conversation. You do realize that you looked at Rand. You know nothing about Rand. You know nothing about what he put forward. Your go-to was KKK. Yeah. Like, you're an awful human being, dude.
And you can see that's his whole agenda on Twitter too.
Yeah, well, that lasted like however long it takes to do 3 or 4 fun thumb swipes, and I got to see, well, Ice Cube, that's your shenanigans, man. You're just, everyone else is racist. All these white people are evil.
Yeah, and I brought it up to a friend at work, and he goes, "Oh, Ice Cube's irrelevant now anyway."
So. Irrelevant now. That is